بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. I am really very honored to be here, and thank you, Dr. Ahmed Al-Shahi and the Sudanese community on Oxford to invite me to share with you some highlights on the Sudan-Egypt boundary and also Sudan-Ethiopia boundary. Unfortunately, I was trying to, I have prepared a presentation, but for technical reasons, it cannot be shown, which is very unfortunate because I have some evidence that I wanted everybody to see. But anyway, the time is short, so I am going to really be brief on the general things and give some highlights on the issues that are pertinent to the dispute between Sudan and Egypt. My lecture is not fully academic, but it's also very interesting to academics because it's going to contain some pertinent, some important information for researchers to actually to make an insight on the views of the two countries on the boundary line between them. As the presenter stated, that the boundaries of Africa have been actually delineated or demarcated in many times by the colonial powers post 1885 Berlin conference, Scramble for Africa, where they divided Africa between them. But however, when I am speaking about Sudan, Egypt, and Ethiopia, I am speaking about pre-colonial era or civilizations that really dated long or 1,000 years before the colonial period, and there existed about 4 different kingdoms and empires in this area, whether it is the Sudanese Kush and Nubian kingdoms, or the Ethiopian Abyssinia, or even the Egyptian. So they predated the colonial era by thousands of years, and there must be a boundary between them. And that is what I am going to disclose here. There are elements of boundaries even 1,000 years or even 7,000 years before colonial period between these entities, although they were not recognized or there was no international law at that time. But anyway, there was a recognition of boundaries. Before I actually go on about the boundaries, I think people get confused always about some terminology in boundaries, whether it is delimitation or demarcation. So the delimitation of boundary is a description of the boundary in a text, in a legal text that has predated the boundaries, and the demarcation is the marking of the boundary on the ground by pillars and then issued in a maps. And that is very important because especially for us to identify before it, and there are other terminologies like the effectivité administrative, which are decrees and administrative orders that actually pertain to the issue of the boundary or controlling of a territory between two administrative areas. And when these two administrative areas become as independent countries, then that administrative order assumes international legal instrument and become like a treaty or agreement that describes the boundary, and it will be since at the time of the independence of these areas. And this is apparent even in Africa from the ICJ ruling of Burkina Faso and Mali, which were two provinces of France when they gained independence. And that ruling of 1994 described this, and since then it became clear the usage of it. Okay, as for Sudan and Egypt, many, I will be talking about it later, many start in their talk about Sudan boundaries about 1899 agreement between Britain and Egypt as the agreement for the boundaries between them. But here I am going to contest whether that is right or even it is legally sound to call it as a boundary agreement that describes the boundary. And before I go to Sudan, let us see what are the boundaries of Egypt, which is a very important question. What are the boundaries of Egypt before Sudan was born? Because when we're talking about Sudan, Egypt was a province or a region of the Ottoman Empire, at least since 1841, as semi-autonomous. But even before that, it was a province of the Ottoman Empire. What were the boundaries of Egypt? Because many people really neglect this issue of where the boundaries of Egypt even before 1899. They only ask Sudan boundary with Egypt is born in 1889, but later I will talk about even further dates in history. At least in 1841 February, I think it is 8th of February, the Ottoman Empire issued what you call a firman, which is a legal an order, a law or a legal text, accompanied by a map, and that map gave that firman gave Muhammad Ali Pasha the right to be a governor, to be the governor of Egypt for all his life, and then this governorship will be inherited by his descendants after him. In that, it accompanied with a map, and that map shows the boundary of Sudan and Egypt. At that time, it was not called Sudan, but it called Nubia. And the Nubian boundary extend in the mid of the Nile to Aswan. And on the west, even north of Aswan, excluding the oasis of Dakhla and Kharja, which belongs to another entity I will be talking about later. On the eastern side, on the boundary was in the Gulf of Banyas, some, I think, 92 kilometers north of Shalatin. North of Shalatin, and that is the boundary of that eastern part of Sudan with Egypt. This is declared as a firman, and is very important instrument when you are talking about boundary making or boundary legal instruments, is the highest map that can acquire the full legal authority is the map that is being issued with a law, with an arrêt or a firman like this or a decree. Then that it assumes the finality of the map. So if I have this map here, sorry I couldn't show it there, but the map is there. But even before that, in 1829, the government of the Ottoman Empire asked a French company to issue a map on its behalf on the boundaries of Egypt. And it is exactly the same as the one in the Firman. And that is also published in France, and it is still there. So in that map, I can say, generally, from the east, and even Sinai Peninsula is not part of Egypt. At that time, it is part of Hijaz, which is Saudi Arabia right now. So all this time, it was never. And Sinai was only transferred to Egypt in 1914. From it, but amazingly, from 1899 or 900, Sinai was part of Sudan, was governed by Sudan, by Al-Hakim Al-Am, the Governor General in Sudan, and that is why when there was a dispute in Taba, they could not find any papers because the boundary between Ottoman authorities in Palestine and Sinai was done under the Sudan administrative issues. But this saying, nobody speaks about it. It's been buried, but it is there. That is why Egypt got Taba in the arbitration. When I come to Bernice, and the Bernice is now in Egypt, from Bernice to Sawakin to even Musawa, all these were part of Hijaz. It's not part of Sudan, it's not part of Egypt, it is not part. So nobody says Sawakin or Halaib or Aizab was part of Egypt. It was part of Saudi Arabia or Hijaz, and it was governed by the Ottoman province of Jeddah. So all the papers there, if you are looking for papers for Sawakin, Aizab, and all this area, Bernice, you can only find it in Jeddah. Within that, until 1874 or 1876, when it was annexed with Sudan. So that was the first, only 5 or less than 10 years before the Mahdist revolution, that the eastern coast of Sudan was re-annexed with Sudan. So, and through other agreements, as I will talk, even in 1899, it was then. Okay. Then also, if we try to examine the other international legal instruments that we are talking about, most Egyptians and even Sudanese and even others who are talking about the Sudan boundaries, they talk about the agreement of 1899 that describes the boundaries of Sudan as at the 22nd parallel north of Halfa, and then it is a straight line. But as I said, there was a history, an illegal history even before that. You cannot start history from 1899. But even if when you talk about the agreement between Britain and Egypt, it is misleading. There was no agreement, as we understand it today, between Britain and Egypt in 1899 to determine the boundaries of Sudan and Egypt. That is not right. First of all, if you look into the British treaty series, you will not find that agreement there. And when I looked there, I couldn't find it. I was wondering why. So I started reading before that. And then I came across the draft of that agreement. Why I went there also, because there was some discrepancy in the documents I found when I went in my research to look at this agreement as published. As a lawyer, I went to see the text, the legal text published in the Gazette. So in the first Gazette of the government of the Sudan, issued on 8th of March 1899, you will find this 1899 agreement published there. In English, it says agreement. In Arabic, it doesn't say ittifaqiyya. It says wifaq. And I wonder why it is here and there. Then I remember one thing, that there was an advisory opinion of the ICJ on the Western Sahara, which explains that the agreements done by the colonial powers with African chiefs during the scramble for Africa are not covered by international law, and they are not international legal instruments. And that is why in Arabic it was said wifaq. It is not agreement. But then I went to read the archive. I found that the Turkey or the Ottoman complained to Britain, because how come you sign an agreement with a vassal state, which is a part of what do you call it, local governor of the Ottoman Empire? And the British government's response was very clear. They stated that they never signed an international agreement with the Khedive. And that is why when I was reading also, I found that when Lord Cromer sent the draft agreement to Lord Salisbury replied to him that he advised him, don't name it treaty or convention, because we are not signing it with the sovereign. So Lord Cromer named it as an agreement which he does not or was not accepted as a legal instrument under international law at that time. That is all not after 1945, the word agreement became an international instrument. But before that, it was not. It was not international instrument. Then I also looked into the reasons and even the clear text. I did not see a text that described the boundary. In that 1899, it describes Sudan as the area south of parallel 22. And I said to myself, why it is specifically south 22, while it is originally, even it is on the 24th or even 2450 or 30 above Aswan. Then I found a very a telegram from Lord Cromer to Lord Salisbury, explaining that the irrigation system built by Muhammad Ali Pasha for Egypt was becoming insufficient, and there is a need to build a dam in Egypt, and that he actually asked some British engineers to look at the best place to build a dam in Egypt. And in that agreement, it is either in Kew Gardens, if anybody wants to look at it. They can find all these documents I'm talking about here in London, in the British Archive. And that there was no place to build a dam in Egypt. The nearest place to build a dam lies in the Nubian, in the land of Nubia. And that also in another document, that the extent of the lake behind that dam will extend to parallel 22. Hence there was this mention, a description of the Sudan. It's not the boundaries of Sudan, but the Sudan. But even after that, there are some areas of Sudan were north of parallel 22. Mostly the Egyptians refer to what you call to the decisions of the Minister of Interior, Mustafa Fahmi, who actually gave back part of the areas to Sudan as a decision from the Minister of Interior. But in fact, if you looked in Egypt from 1874 until 1922, all prime ministers in Egypt were the ministers of Interior. So they have two hats, all of them. So Mustafa Fahmi, when they refer to him as the Minister of Interior, that is not 100% correct. He is what they call it, Rais Majlis al-Nuzar. He is the Prime Minister of Egypt and the Minister of Interior, and he was in charge of the provinces of Egypt. So he issued a decree giving back some areas to Sudan, or assuring that the areas remain in Sudan. It is not giving back. They were never Egyptian to give back, even in the West, because even when you go back to 1899, that line description did not apply to Sawakin and the Red Sea, because they came back in 1899 itself and had another agreement about Sawakin province in July. So when they are talking about 1899, there are two different distinct agreements. One of them is only about the north in Nubia, and the other one is about, and the decision, that's why there are two different decisions. One in 1899, March 1899, the other one that concerning Faras and Adindan and all these areas, and the other one was in 1902, because at that time the dam issue was completed. Then they turned. But even in that, if you read the file, it says that the قانون العربان الصادر في مصر في 1892. So the law that applies to the nomads in Egypt in 1892 was never applied to the people in the Halab Abu Ramad area. Never. And that is why they will leave them with Sudan. So the array itself, if you read it, it was not giving Egyptian land to Sudan, but confirming that that area remains in Sudan. And these two legal documents issued and also published in the Egyptian Gazette, they stopped Egypt from claiming beyond them, not Sudan. This can create stopple because Sudan never intervened anyway. It was not there. And even Britain never intervened. So it is all Egypt who did all this. But however, when I speak about it, there are a lot of other even prehistory documents, like if you read the history of Ibn Battuta, remember he wanted to go to Hajj through Aizab, Aizab. Aizab is next to Halab. Okay? And then he reported that when he reached Aizab, he found that the Amir there, Bashar, burned all the ships there and refused any to leave to Jeddah. So he said he went back to Egypt to go to Hajj through Egypt. So he went through Sinai to the Hajj. Even when Ibn Battuta, it was not under the control of Egypt at all. And there was no history of it anywhere, of any Egyptian pharaohs or so and so controlling it. In fact, there was a pharaoh called Samna, had a pillar boundary in the island of the elephants, north west of Aswan, where he put that was the boundary of Nubians, of Kushites. And then north of it, they have no area or no land beyond that. And that is historically, it is there, and they cannot do it. Even when we go to the historians, like Brown and Tunisi, when they visited Darfur, Darfur used to extend to the oasis of Dakhla and Kharja. And right there, next to Cairo, the soldiers of the Sultan of Darfur were there, and they received these historians and they led them to Al-Fashir. So in all these areas, the area of Sudan is there. There, before 1899, there were no Nubians at all in Egypt. All Nubians are in Nubia, and they were never in Egypt at all. But even during the Mahdist regime, there was a province, two provinces that survived the Mahdism, by the way. Nobody knows about them. One of them is Sawakin. It was never under the Mahdist. Second province was the northern province, which lies from Halfa to Aswan. And this remained independent and reporting direct to the Ottoman in Istanbul, not through Egypt, both of them. Until the British sent Kitchener to invade this area. Again, when you read the agreement of 1899, just to ensure that I clarify something, in the response of Britain, they said everything we did was in accordance with our bilateral treaty with the Ottoman Sultan. The treaties that you can find in the British treaty series is 1885 and 1887. And both treaties are concerning Egypt and Sudan, whereby the Ottoman Empire allowed and gave permission to the British to revitalize the economy of Egypt and to re-annex Sudan back to the Ottoman sovereignty. And it is clear there, if you read them and then you read this agreement, you know that these are the legally binding agreements for Britain not to sign any agreement with Egypt, and also that Egypt is not an independent state. That is also explanation that is needed. I think also just to move, Egyptian also they are claiming that that the only instrument is the 1899 agreement. But if you go to the records of the Security Council in 1947 and 48, you will find An-Naqrashi Basha and also the An-Nahas Basha. They declared that the 1899 was never an agreement, and also Egypt never approved it or endorsed it. Then when we move again in 1952, we will find the first Egyptian parliament, it passed a resolution declaring that the 1899 agreement as null and void. Then, where is the agreement that describes the boundary? If you go back, you will find the only agreement that describes the boundary is the 1953 agreement between Egypt and Britain, whereby it was declared and prepared Sudan for self-determination. And then the UN and the maps and the constituencies for the election, these are the instruments that are really important for the boundary. All the rest of it is none and void. So, in accordance with the 1899 and also the work of the Election Commission, the United Nations Election Commission, and the results of it, Sudan became an independent. And that is the only agreement on the only internationally legally binding instrument that can even be useful in any litigation or arbitration. The rest of it is just political or social talk, nothing else. Nothing, and they have no legal power at all. We go back just to make sure, also about, I talked in the presentation actually about the Abu Ramad and also the area, the new sultanate which appeared about 5-6 years ago, about the area that the Egyptians refused to control it, and it was declared as a new government, a new territory. I don't know who recognized this territory, but most of the people who visit that territory, they come through Egypt. It's not accepted by the African Union or the UN, and it can never be accepted because the area is there is no terra nullius. There is no terra nullius area anywhere in Africa at all. So if it is Egypt, they don't want it, they can give it away, but they cannot declare it terra nullius. These are the main issues about the boundary. I'm sorry, I don't know. Is that...
We still got about 20 minutes.
20 minutes more,
so
okay.
We have to have
Fashaga.
Ethiopia.
Okay.
Yeah, so we don't. But one thing I think our audience say, what happens to Halab now?
Halab is under occupation. Legally, it is under occupation. If the Egyptians, they really have any legal rights, we can go to arbitration or even ICJ, not by force. Because Sudan, when they first asserted their right there, Sudan complained to the Security Council in 28th of February 1958. But the Egyptians, they didn't want anything but to have it by force. Now, especially after 2011 or 2014, they really tried to change the demography, to change the society, to change everything. And this is an occupation. It is no different from any other occupation. If they have a right, okay, we are brothers, we are neighbors, we can go to the court, and then the court give whoever, if you have right, even brothers, they go to court to divide the inheritance. Okay? So we can go to the court to determine who has that right. But saying that we have that right, I mean, even if you go, I looked at even all the atlases of Egypt, okay? Before 1991, you will not see Halab or Shalatin or part of Egypt. Never. And also, even in their school curricula, you will never see that there was a claim about this. So even their own deed since independence is against them. Egypt was a member of the League of Nations. It is mapped. It is also the area did not include Halab at all. And it is one of the countries that actually participated in drafting the the United Nations Charter in San Francisco. And it is mapped an area never included Halab at that time. And when Sudan was admitted to the UN, Egypt never complained about including Halab or Nutuwa, the Halfa, into the Halfa salient into Sudan. And also, I mentioned before there was a United Nations Electoral Commission which actually approved all the electoral constituencies. There was a member from representing Egyptian government in that. He never complained. He never had any reservation or any other thing, any complaint about it.
When was it Halab occupied by the Egyptian forces?
Yeah, 1996, 95.
It's very recent.
But that was even not full occupation. But it increased from 2014. 2014 up to now, it increased. There are some military presence of Sudan there, but it's been under siege. They are living there under siege for the past 20 years. They are not being moved, and they are still there in Halab.
The population?
Huh?
Population?
The population or the distance. Amazingly, Egypt went to arbitration for Taba to acquire or to prove that he has a right for 1,000 meters. 1,000 meters. And the distance of Halab is 22 or 21,000 kilometers. So which one is which one deserves really arbitration or litigation? I mean, this is with its population, and also the population have been part of Sudan all these centuries. Yeah, we moved to Fashaga because it is
Ethiopia because of time.
It's time. Okay. Fashaga and Sudan and Ethiopia boundary is also a long history of a boundary, moving boundaries actually, especially with active part of Ethiopia or Abyssinia, and but there existed a boundary generally known in at least in 1800. That the Ethiopians, they live in the highlands, and the Sudanese are in the lowlands, with the exception of some parts. For example, part of Bani Shangol are part of Sudan, but they are in the highlands as well. But now they are in Ethiopia. When the British, first of all, there are a lot of talks and claims, unofficially, by the way, I will say, whatever people talk about, there is no boundary dispute between the government of Ethiopia and the government of Sudan. By the way, just to clear things, all the talks is outside. But the government to government, there is no dispute about the boundary pillars or the boundary running where it is. Everybody knows. But some people from here and there, for political reasons, they wanted to claim that they have part in Fashaga. But that is, to my knowledge, and I have been part of this issue for a long time, it is not official stance of the Ethiopian government. It is not official stance of the technical Ethiopians at all to dispute where the boundary pillars are. Again, the boundary between Sudan and Ethiopia have been delimited in 1900 and then redelimited in 1902. And then it was demarcated in 1903, and then it was redemarcated in 1972. And now we are talking about intensifying the boundary pillars. So we're not talking about demarcation, redemarcation, or delimitation. No, intensifying the existing boundary pillars with more boundary pillars, to be clear. So that is as it is. Let us go a little bit, because always boundary studies involve part of history. You have to know the administrative history and the extent of the administrative history to understand where this boundary have been, because boundaries are like humans. Sometimes they always shift and they grow from childhood to So they change. And that changes, you have to track the changes to know exactly where this boundary is. In 1900, the British, when they assumed control of Sudan, they started even in 1899 to talk with the Abyssinian or Ethiopian Menelik emperor for the boundary of Sudan, and also with the Italians next with the boundaries between Sudan and Eritrea right now. So there are two, when we talk about an agreement, 1902 agreement, there are two 1902 agreements. One concerning the boundary between Sudan and Eritrea, one is concerning Sudan and Egypt. So just to make it clear to people not to be confused about, because when it is referred to, it's sometimes confusing. And Menelik started the negotiation with the British embassy in Addis Ababa with accepting the current boundaries between Sudan and Ethiopia. And he declared that he is not claiming sovereignty. But we have to remember, but also from the talk between Ethiopians and Sudanese, there are talk that Ethiopia doesn't claims that these boundary agreements are colonial boundaries. When we see that Menelik was a participant in Berlin conference in 1885, Ethiopia was never under colonial power, and it was a colonial power itself. Because Ethiopia or Abyssinia in 1885 is not Ethiopia right now. It was very small at that time, but it is scrambled for African territories like the Europeans when they scrambled for African territories. So if the claim or the what you call the pretense of that it can be rejected as it is an colonial agreement, first it doesn't apply to boundary agreements anyway. But also not to Ethiopia, because Ethiopia was a colonial force itself, like Britain or like the Europeans anyway. So it is not itself under colonial influence to say that it was some lands were taken from it. He, in his letter to King Edward, I think, after the starting of the negotiations, requested that Britain look favorably to Ethiopian demands, and that Ethiopia is a poor country with no land for agriculture. So he requests, without claiming of sovereignty, and he stated it, without claiming of sovereignty, that is in his letter, not from me, that he wanted some lands to the west, in the lowlands, for his people to cultivate. Second request, and that is after the drafting of the boundary of 1900. 1900, there was a draft treaty. You can find it in the British Archive there. It described the boundary. So he wanted also the town of Matamma, because he claimed that the Matamma, the Emperor Johannes, has been killed by the dervishes in that town and is buried there. And it is not good that he is a sacred person to be left in Sudan. So he wanted that the Matamma is right now. He also asked that Ethiopia is a poor country, and he needed that some concession in Bani Shangol to mine for gold because he has no resources, no mineral resources. And then Britain accepted this in the draft 1902 agreement. And in that agreement, they describe the boundary as starting from a point at the intersection of River Sitit and River and Khor Hajar, to be the tri-junction between Eritrea, Sudan, and Ethiopia. And then from there, a straight line to Matamma, where he divided Matamma and Gallabat and took Matamma into Ethiopia and left Gallabat in Sudan, and then straight it went into the description as. That description was actually surveyed before by the what you call the deputy, what you call, what's his name? No, it's deputy head of the survey in Sudan. What's his name? It was Major Gwyn. So Major Gwyn, in 1900, he went into a cadastral survey of the area, and he suggested the best areas to make the boundary pillars and the camps and all these things. And then he was in 1902, when the agreement came into force, entered into force, I think it was 28th of October 1902, when he was notified the acceptance of King of Britain of the agreement. And that was the condition of entry into force. On the, I think on the 9th or 8th of July, he sent a letter of recommendation to King Edward. He appraised the work of Major Gwyn as a professional and all this, and he gave his trust for him to complete the job.
Is that Menelik?
Menelik.
The emperor?
That is Emperor Menelik. And then there was, then we started in the demarcation phase in 1903. Okay. In 1903, he was accompanied by groups of local heads of tribes from both sides, Ethiopia and Sudan. And then he went there and he I think identified and made 25 boundary pillars between Sudan and Ethiopia. But he also deviated from the boundary line that was done, was as described in 1902 agreement. He shifted the boundary with tri-junction from Khor Hajar to Khor Rawiyan. And this shift placed a lot of, I think, Al-Humara, Abdul Rafi, and Abdul Majid, and other areas of Sudan, which were eastern part of Fashaga right now, and added them into Egypt, into Ethiopia. But that is also normal sometimes. Why? He also said that because of the demarcation, the demarcation commission between Italy and Britain, determining the boundary between Eritrea and Sudan, is stopped at the junction of Khor Rawiyan and River Sitit. So he moved this westward, I think more than maybe 50 50 or 100 kilometers back and added all this area back to Ethiopia. And he went there. Britain also conceded giving Beni Shangol to Ethiopia under some conditions. One of them is very important condition in Article 4 of the 1902 agreement, that Ethiopia will not be permitted to build any dams or any gorges to arrest the flow of the river of the Blue Nile unless the British and the Sudanese governments gave their consent, which never happened anyway. And that is it. Then there were some claims area, what you call, in 1947, the emperor's heir to Saron, I think his name was, I don't know, I think his son or something of Haile Selassie, okay, came and visited London, and in that papers he admitted and he confirmed to the British government that they accepted without any reservation the boundary pillars done by Menelik. Then again in 1972, the Ethiopians, also the Ethiopian government, requested from Sudan to concede some more areas, around 4 of the mountains, that instead of the boundary pillars on top of the on the east of the boundary of the mountains area east of it, to be on top, on the summit of the boundary. And Sudan, Mansour Khalid accepted that. Then again, Ethiopia gained a lot of area from Sudan. And then the boundary was redemarcated again. They added another 3 areas apart from the last hill, because there are some villages in there and government institutions inside there, and it was not done because that is a difficulty. And then from 2001 to 2014, I was part of the commission. We never argued, we never disputed the boundary line. Whatever we did is that we actually agreed on 183 more boundary pillars to intensify the boundary. So instead of the boundary pillars after 10 or 5 or 10 kilometers, they become after 2 or 3 kilometers, so that people can see them from one point to another. And where we stopped is that the financing of this stopped, but it was supposed to have happened and intensified in 2015. Unfortunately, there was some political turbulences in Ethiopia that delayed the whole thing. But again, the Ethiopian government reassured Sudan always, officially, from their own Ministry of Foreign Affairs. They never disputed the boundary of it. But there are some Amharas who wanted to cultivate in Sudan, and then they wanted to claim that the Fashaga is part of Sudan. Fashaga is not part of Ethiopia at all, and it can never be unless Sudan decided to give them like the ones before. But they have no legal grounds to claim it at all.
Good.
Okay.
Thank
you.
Well,
yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mark. Really an excellent lecture, and I'm sure there are lots of questions from the audience. We got half an hour because we have to vacate the whole building at 5 o'clock. There will be tea and some nice treat by some our friends Sudanese, very kind. The ladies made lots of. So we put our time to it. Yeah, thank you. So when I say half an hour for question and answer, could you please? Can you have attention, please? Can we have some attention, please? Hi. Can we have some? Can you listen, please? If you ask very question, Ma'ad, please. Ma'ad. Sorry. If you ask question, ask them very briefly. And I ask Ma'ad also to answer very briefly so that we maximize the time for your question and answer. I start with very general question and I say, Sudan wasn't a Sudan until 1820-21, because at that time, what they call Bilad al-Sudan, which does not refer to area, it refers to people. The medieval Arabs say Bilad, the black people, the land of the black people, and extend from Ethiopia right to Cape Verde. It's only when the British, French, and the Ottoman Empire came to Africa, then all these problems, which Ma'ad has been referring to, appear at different time by different regime. And it's still going on. It's still Fashaga, it's still Halai, let alone, I mean, we haven't referred yet to the Abyei. But now I open the question, so please do ask your question and briefly. So here we are. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Yes, please.
I just want to thank Dr. Maaz and Dr. Shahi for this session. My question is, I want to go back to the conflict between Sudan and Egypt about Halab and Shalatin. What is the difference between the political boundaries or borders and the administration borders?
Thank you. That's one question. Yes, please.
Thank you, Dr. Maaz, thank you for this valuable lecture. My question is, there are two agreements with Egypt. One in 1899, the other in 1902. The problem or the conflicts have grown because Sudan is following one treaty while Egypt is following another one. That is 1902 is different from 1899 accord, especially for concerning Halab, Shalatin, and Abu Rahman. That is the main issue. From that agreement of 1902, they ignored about line 22. So some land became above it, some land became below it.
So what your question,
and
please?
Created that horrible area now, which is called Bir Tawil, which nobody wants it. Thank you.
Right, thank you. The lady there, yes, and I come to you here.
Okay,
Yes.
I really appreciate what you have been done today, and I would like to ask you first question. As you said, we are brothers with Egyptian people.
Right.
Why we are separated like inheritance between brothers and give Halab to do election to choose where you are going?
Good question.
Second question, I would
Now,
like
just one question, please. Thank you. Yes, the lady here. Yes, thank you. I'm pointing. Yes, because you raise your hand.
It is. Thank you very much for the lecture. My question is, if all this evidence and maps and stuff are there, what prevents Sudanese government?
What is what? Sorry?
What
Prevent.
prevents Sudanese authorities to go to court?
Okay.
To war. Right.
court.
To court, not to war. It may result, by the way, in there. You don't know. Look at the dam, Renaissance Dam. It's always a questionable.
Thank you, Dr. Shahid. Thank you, Dr. Maaz. We have the legal ground or basis for of Sudanese point of view. What are the legal ground for Egyptian when they claim these are part of Egypt?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I can answer from the last thing. There is no legal grounds. Right. It's all political. Egypt doesn't have any legal grounds for the claim. And there is no agreement. That agreement, it is not international agreement. In 1800, it is wifaq, walaysa ittifaq. So it is not agreement. But also, even if it is agreement, that agreement could have been modified by so many instruments until 1952. That is more important than 1899. So I don't want any Sudanese to have the idea that there was an agreement. And that is creating the political and the international. There is no international line. By the way, there is no political line and there is no international line because the country cannot have two agreements. But I will give you two boundaries. I will give you one example. The boundary of 1899, the description, it is not international boundary at all. And one of the evidence is that if you want to read the 1899 agreement between Sudan and Italy on the boundary of Eritrea, you will know that the boundary of Eritrea was referred to as between Eritrea and Sudan and Egypt, not Sudan. So Egypt was extended until the boundary of Eritrea. Then there was no boundary south of Aswan. Again, Aswan itself, its name was not Aswan. This is very new name, by the way. Before 1870 something, it was called As-Sinan, not Aswan. Aswan, this is Egyptian name. The Sudanese, the Nubians, they call it As-Sinan. I don't know what it means, but it is a Nubian language. They understand it. I don't.
Thank you. Ask the ladies here about the Brotherhood of Egypt.
The Brotherhood of Egypt. The question is that in the international law, the international court does not accept litigation or from one country if the other country doesn't accept, unless they have another way that there is some agreement that they accepted the jurisdiction of the government. So Egypt have to accept the jurisdiction of the International Court of Justice before Sudan can actually take Egypt to that country. Sudan accepts the jurisdiction of Egypt fully on all international disputes and agreements and interpretation of international law. But Egypt has a reservation. She only accepts the jurisdiction, compulsory jurisdiction of the Court of Justice on the issues related to Suez Canal, nothing else. So that's why Sudan cannot take itself, cannot take it.
Thank you. And the gentleman here. Mm-hmm. Yes, your question. Yeah.
My question. Mm-hmm. I think he mentioned, because I asked about the legal ground.
Can we please?
Yes, I answered it first. Egyptians, they don't have legal ground.
Why they refuse to take that part of the land? It has any legal implication when you say there's a piece of land the Egyptian refused to claim it? Is there any legal implication for this decision?
Well, I think it is not a proper. If they don't want it, let them apply. Let formally the African Union that this is not our land, or the United Nations that this is not our land. Then you take it seriously. But otherwise, it is political, no legal grounds. It is part of Egypt by the 1952 agreement between Britain and Egypt. for the self-determination of Sudan. And Sudan cannot claim it unless there are some things. If the Egyptians, they want to undo the boundaries, then Sudan have the right to go back to the Aswan boundary.
Yes,
yes,
sir. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Shahi. Thank you.
Not at all.
My question is...
can we raise your finger? Yeah.
What about Abyei?
Well, Abyei is very important area of Sudan, and there are a lot of, if I can talk 2 hours about it and will not end. It's very complicated. I cannot give you one thing, but Abyei is Sudanese area, despite all the things that are being said. And I can explain to you.
Abyei is inhabited by Dinka.
Yes.
Kordofan tribes going there during the sort of rainy season and back again. And the Dinka goes to Kordofan. There isn't, Abyei entirely is Sudanese.
Okay, this is remind me of a question here. Why don't they give the people of Halayib?
Dr. Mansour Khalid, he said he gives a half pairs of the Ethiopian people, and you have to stop them from Al-Fashaga. Also, the city, you agree with us, with Dr. Mansour Khalid at 19 something, and that is your parents. Why you come back again and you get another mark land from?
Yes, I mean, but anyway, just to say,
Mansour Khalid is no longer with us. He
so cannot
explain that to you.
Okay, so if the international community, the international law does not accept that to give a population, okay, the right to choose between a country or another. It has to be, when you go to the court, the boundaries have to be under legally described and accepted under international law. The population have no thing. If you want to go back to the boundary dispute between Libya and Chad and Awuzo, did not accept the petition. The court, International Court of Justice, did not accept the petition of the population that they belong to Egypt. They said, no, if you elect to Egypt, you go to Egypt, the land is Chadian. So if you want to go to Libya, you go to Libya, no problem, but the land is not Libyan.
I know that. Sorry. Richard and the gentleman. Yes, Richard?
Yeah, thank you. My name's Richard. I'm a contributor to the Sudanese program.
Well, you are co-chairman.
And thank you for your presentation. And obviously, there's the title of your presentation and the focus of it. And you've spent some 5 years as chairman of the Boundary Commission, I understand. And you mentioned just now that you spent years before that also with the Boundary Commission. I wonder if you could say briefly, while you've been working with the Boundary Commission, what was its prioritization?
Okay, it's a very good question. Even
so many borders.
Even before being part of the Boundary Commission, my PhD in Cambridge is about the boundary between Egypt and Sudan and Kenya. So I have my PhD is still in Cambridge University on boundaries. So I am involved with boundaries for long, even before being part of it. I was, and I am still not taken away from the Boundary Commission between Sudan and Ethiopia. We were concentrating on deciding. We decided on documents, accepted all the documents. We decided on the areas where we need to intensify the boundary area, the boundary pillars, where and which kind of it. And then we we done our budget in 2000, from 2003, but last one was 2012. We are waiting for both governments to actually contribute, to open the account, contribute, and then we start. So that is the only thing, but it is not we are not stopped by any dispute between the technical people, the lawyers and both sides in the boundary. They never had a disagreement at all on the legality of any or opposition of any boundary pillar.
Thank you. As a gentleman, yeah, I will come to you, Al-Haj. Yes.
Thank you for the lecture. Just asking, is there any discrepancy between the current map of Egypt and Sudan submitted on the United Nations, and what the United Nations should do about it?
The United Nations cannot do anything, but the map of Sudan that is being submitted in when it was accepted as a member, and the map of Egypt when it was accepted as a member, as a founding member of the, they do not contain Halab and Nutu Wadi Halfa in Egypt, but they do contain them in Sudan.
But the map in 1956.
Can you please?
So as a map.
Can you just?
Yes, I have answered this political and this area because there was, you know, if you go back and read the records, the British was ruling Sudan on behalf of the Ottoman Empire, and then after 1914, the Ottoman Empire was not there, so they made it all as if they are ruling it on behalf of Egypt. And that is why they did not speak about all the issue of political and international boundary, because there was no international boundary. If we remember, even the Governor General used to go to Halab area for holidays. And also, if you go back to the first proclamation of Kitchener, issued and is published in the Gazette, that no Egyptian law can be applied in Sudan. That was the first thing. It is the first issue. So whatever is Sudan is Sudan. Whatever is Egypt, and all the laws in Sudan are actually approved by the Governor General, not the Egyptians, including Halab and Nutu Wadi Halfa.
Al-Haj, yes, I will come. Sorry, Farouk. Al-Haj and then Farouk, and then Al-Haj, please.
Thank you very much. I'm really pleased.
We can't hear you, Al-Haj, please.
Thank you very much. I'm really pleased to have been here to hear this interesting history. But I'm curious about one thing. And I'll take you back to Mwalimu Julius Nyerere, the previous president of Tanzania, on the issue of the Nile waters. He raised a very important point, saying most of the countries at that region were not part of the agreements that were all made during colonialism, and therefore they were not going to be, bound by it. Why is it then that this talk of agreement, equality, and what have you, it stops the South Sudanese from claiming what is rightly theirs?
Yeah, what do you
Sorry, not South Sudanese,
Well, I think it is what he says cannot be accepted, actually, point blank, what Nyerere said. Because, for example, Ethiopia was not under colonial power when they signed this agreement, so they were a free country and they were sovereign at that time. So you cannot say that these agreements are colonial. Secondly, but even this agreement of 1902, which gives Sudan the right, it gave Sudan right on the Beni Shangol area, not because it is a colonial, because it was part of Sudan and was severed and given to Ethiopia to have some gold mining wealth. I mean, the only condition that Lord Cromer imposed was that only British companies can mine gold in Beni Shangol, nothing else. But they were part of Sudan, and until now, culturally they are Sudanese. Sometimes you don't even distinguish between Bani Shangol and Sudan.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Just one more.
And I'll get to Ambassador Farouk and then I come back to you. I promise I'll come back to you. Yes, Ambassador Farouk, okay. Please.
Thank you very much. I really enjoyed your talk. I just went back to my school days. I remember there was an Egyptian atlas to us in the early 50s. And that atlas does show Halab and Sharatin as part of Sudan, with a big triangle inside the Libyan part of Western Sudan. A big part which disappeared. I don't know what happened to it. But my question is, what happened to our complaint at the United Nations? Is it still there, or has it been withdrawn, or has it been frozen? I don't know.
The complaint is still there.
It's still there.
It's been renewed every January, but there is no move from Sudan. Government has to move because this is more than 70 years of complaining. They have to do something about it, otherwise it will be useless. It will be useless. But the complaint every January, it is being renewed and it is under the agenda of the Security Council. But we have to make it to make some movement.
Sorry, Al-Haj.
Yes. The follow-up to my question is this: Sudan in 1884 was still under Mahdiya.
Sorry, Al-Haj, we can't hear you from here.
Okay. All right. 1884.
Yes.
All right. Sudan was still, Mahdiya was having control in Sudan.
Yes.
Okay. Now, what happened in the British went in 1898, Kitchener. At that time, still the Sudanese could be asked, because they have leaders. The Mahdis were their leaders. They could be asked for the opinion of the Sudanese to be taken into disagreements. But the way it is being said, these agreements were done without the input of the Sudanese. How legal is that?
Oh, the legality of that, because British, they did not consider Sudanese as independent or sovereign. At that time, international law only recognizes the Ottoman Empire. And the British also entered into Sudan and Egypt because of the permission. I mentioned to you of agreement between the Ottoman and the British in well done and negotiated by Sir Dorman Basha in 1885. And then there is another agreement called 1887, which is it was secret agreement, okay, between Britain and Egypt. At that time, the Ottoman Empire didn't mention Sudan, but it mentioned that it gave Britain the right to reoccupy and re-annex the provinces of Darfur, Kordofan, Nubia, and Nubia back to Sudan. So it didn't mention Sudan. It mentioned Darfur, Kordofan, Nubia, and Sinnar back to the Ottoman sovereignty. And if you remember, there was a near fight going to happen in Fashoda in 1900, and between the British and the French. What the British claimed that this is part and parcel of the Ottoman land, and they have the right to be there because they were Ottoman Empire gave them that right. So the permission Britain gained was from the Ottoman Empire, not from the people of the Sudan, because the people of the Sudan, they were not sovereign at that time.
Sorry, no, Mahdi, please.
Thank you.
Very quickly, yeah. We've got 5 minutes left. Yeah.
I will be very quick. But first of all, thank you very much for your presentation. It must have been very difficult without any graphics, any maps. And I must say, it's like a musician without his instruments. However, for those like myself who are not very familiar with the geography, you refer to boundaries several times. Are these boundaries, historical or present, at all governed by any geographical features? Because that is usually, if you like, in universal. There are mountains, there are rivers, there are seas, and they form the boundaries between different countries. Are any of the boundaries that you mentioned around Sudan, past or present, governed by that? And very quickly, you refer to parallel 22. What is the significance of that? In the way, is it influenced by any geographical features or not? Or is it just a ruler and a pencil on the map?
Yeah. Actually...
Sorry, can I have, yes, the three questions? Sorry. Yes, the gentleman here, and then you could wind it up. Yes? Yes, please.
Yeah, my name is Harry. Thank you for the lecture. Just I moved, I got the whole issue to the west side of Sudan, between Darfur and between Sudan and Chad. Is there any similar?
That's very difficult.
And Central African Republic as well.
Thank you. Hashim, yes, very quickly, and we stop.
I'd like to thank you for the informative lecture. Yeah. And what was interesting is the historical part of this, because I have been to the Bodian level, which is full of all the rare documents, and I did not find this. I found only the agreement up to 1899, which is ridiculous. So, what are the sources of which you, of course, you did a lot of research, the sources for which you got all this background information, which is important in the case of disputes and other things, the historical part.
Thank you. Now, we have a question from a former student of the Middle East Center some time ago. Yeah, please. Ikram, yes.
About 20 years ago, and I've kept up with the region. My question, as I was a student here, I was already an economist before I became a student, and I remained an economist. And in economics, we look at the trade-off between law and enterprise. And so the question to you is, by defining the borders differently over time, was there a change in the things that make the economy move? That would be the movement of people, the movement of money, the movement of goods. Does this redefinition, has it historically had any major effect on Sudan's economy?
So right, the last question is Richard. Oh, Rosemary, I'm sorry, Will. Yeah. Yes?
To add on to Ikram's question, international law and history, they have their own validities. But the interests of people who live in border regions, as has been mentioned to, sometimes is quite, can conflict with that. And I wonder whether in your many years of both research and then working with the Boundaries Commission, whether you've come to reflect on this tension between the interest of the capital and the state in asserting boundaries and territorial rights versus the interests of communities there, not so much the powerful people in the community there, but sometimes the humble people.
Thank you. Last question, Rosemary, please.
My question was, there is an idea that somebody out there imposes these boundaries on the people in the region. Don't you think it is time for the indigenous, the local people in the area, to negotiate what it is that they want, or where it is that they consider is their boundary?
Very good question, Rosemary. I leave that to Dr. Maaz to answer these, and then I will just have one last, not question, but a clarification for you, which you will enjoy hearing from me. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you very much. Actually, let us start with the end question. Mostly in international law, local people are not considered, really, unless it is a self-determination issue. And that self-determination issue also, it is not open. So only when the states agree to give a self-determination, but self-determination by international law, I think the international community, only few places in the world remain to determine their future, like Palestine and others. However, it's also the question about the value or the economic value. I mean, the first change in the Sudan boundary, significant change, was that giving up the northern part of Sudan. Northern part of Sudan was not an empty area between Aswan and Wadi Halfa or Faras or Adindan. There were more than 30 between village and towns, a small one, and Korosko and others. These are very and also very ancient civilization there. They were given up, destroyed, and the people there were forced to migrate because of building of the dam. So that is the economy. Building the dam, they chopped that area from Nubia and annexed it to Egypt. And to control it, and to control the lake and the area, they identified Sudan in 1899. As I said, it is not a boundary agreement. It is not a boundary description provision. It is only says that Sudan will be called the areas south of 22nd parallel, like that. And that's one of the things that I wonder. As of the mention of the archive, all the talk I am giving and the archives are all in London in Kew Gardens, in the official record. Whoever want to find it, it is very difficult digging. Yeah. It takes years to dig, and it took me nearly more than 10 years of going there and to acquire a lot of things, and I still go there from time to time. Good for you. So that is it. So because the consideration of the economy of the people, it was for example, in northern Sudan, is for the benefit of the people of Egypt, to give them the land to build a dam, Aswan Dam, not the high dam, the old dam. Okay, and also for Ethiopia to give them Beni Shangol because it is famous with mine with gold. Yes. So they gave them the people and the area together. That is also the issue. I don't know whether I missed any question or I have.
No, that is. Now, please, just let us. Is the chair? Yes, I know the chair will.
Natural features.
Huh?
Natural features.
Oh yes, about the natural features. All we try in our commissions to actually use natural features. So the boundaries, apart from even the mention of 22nd parallel, the other amendments, they relied on natural features, whether they are hills or water courses or other identified markers. And in the Ethiopian Sudan also, there are a lot of natural markers were there, where some of the areas areas where boundary line runs is either on a water course, inside water course, or on top of mountains or so. Straight lines only in the north and the northwest, and the triangle you are looking for was given to Libya in 1934. Yes, that was the western part. It was given to Italy at that time. And this is something I want to say about the question about Western Sudan. In Western Sudan, there was a boundaries even before the British between Sultan Ali Dinar and Waddai. But when the British came in and the French came in, then they asked people whom they prefer. So those who prefer the British, they annex them. Those who prefer Chad or the French, they annex them to Chad. Yeah. Apart from South area in Central Africa, where part of Darfur called Darunga, was up to Bangui. This was taken by French and annexed and made into Central Africa, because that is also part of it. I think I answered all the questions.
Before we, no, there's no more questions. There's no more questions. We are going to end up soon after what I said. We had a conference in Manchester, Richard and myself, we were there, about sustainability of peace in South Sudan. And there were a couple of maps inside. And a South Sudanese ambassador, he's a diplomat, wrote to me and he said, could you please change the map? Honestly. He said, could you please change the map?
That's normal.
And I mentioned this. He says, Zod malu mkashkish? I wrote to him and I said, sorry, Majdi, I said, look, this is not for me or you. You write to your president, Salva Kiir, and then discuss it, not with me. I have nothing to do with it. I have not drawn the map. I have not talked about the map. So it's you and your bosses. But that is, in a sense, how I remember the dispute is between South Sudan and Kenya, some bit of land there, which the Kenyan,
triangle.
Yeah, the triangle. So anyhow, put your hands to Dr. Maaz for really.
Thank you very much.
Now, you are all invited to have tea upstairs with a lovely treat from Sudanese ladies. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
بارك الله فيك يا أخي، شكرا جزيلا يا أخي، بارك الله فيك، الله يسلمك. ها؟ الله يسلمك، بارك الله فيك. ها؟
قلت لك يا دكتور، الحمد لله. بالنسبة دائما بنسمع الحدود السياسية والحدود الإدارية بالنسبة لحلايب. إنه حلايب إداريا تابعة للسودان. كله كلام فارغ. كلام فارغ. ما حاجة اسمها سياسية.
بارك الله فيك. زي المصريين بيقولوا كده. الله يسلمك، بارك الله فيك. الحمد لله، الله يسلمك بخير. كيف صحتك؟ جيت من مسافة بعيدة. بارك الله فيك. الحمد لله. عملت أمجد؟ تعرفه؟ كويس ها؟
في الوسط ولا ما
في dispute بسيطة. اوكي. ان شاء الله. معليش انا ما قدرت.
ايوه لكن لكن ممكن نعمل معك كارتون سوداني.
ممكن ولو عايزينها ممكن ارسلها.
ممكن ترسلها.
ارسلها لاحمد الشاهي ينزلها في دكتور. I can send it to you to put it in the university.
And also we want to take photograph, you, me and Richard.
Okay.
For the
Okay.